I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Last time in chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching, what we did, as usual, was that we identified the lines that have a structural similarity to one another. And as you can see, I've highlighted the characters that repeat themselves in the 7 lines from line 5 all the way down to line 11. So all these lines are 3 characters in length, and they all have the same character in the middle. So that's a pretty good hint to us that they belong to one section. And indeed, it is the centerpiece of chapter 8 that talk about the 7 virtues of water. So last time we were able to get through the first part of it. And today, we're getting ready to proceed from 5 down to the end of the chapter, covering the centerpiece. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right in there. The first one, the first virtue, is called dwelling with the right location. All of these lines require some explanation. I think that the first 3 lines are actually easier to comprehend than the last 4. With this first one, we do have a hint as to what dwelling with the right location can possibly mean. And this is because in the previous 4 lines, it talks about how water stays in places that people dislike. And as I talked about last time, the commentary Contention Times basically point out that water flows downhill. So when we talk about water staying in places people dislike, it means water is gathering at the lowest place as a visual imagery for the virtue of humility. Therefore, one of the layers of meaning in line 1, dwelling with the right location, has to do with that, has to do with humility. So, starting with this line, it's no surprise that it will be emphasizing the virtue of humility because this is the beginning of the centerpiece of chapter 8, 7 lines, 3 characters each, to further flesh out what we talked about last time, this cool and detached individual, this cultivator of the depth. And you know, the example that I used last time from classic rock was the Tom Sawyer mentality from the rock group Rush. Okay, so let's explore the dual meaning, dwelling with the right location. So meaning number 1, as I said, water occupies the lowest place as a visual imagery for the Tao of humility. So what I spoke of last time that I'd like to reiterate again today is that I would like to get everyone to start thinking about humility as the path of moderation rather than as the extreme. So there may be a misconception that's putting arrogance as one extreme and then humility as the other extreme. I would like to say, no, humility is actually the path of moderation because the other extreme is not humility. The other extreme is self-debasement, self-hatred. So think about arrogance as being, very self-centered, thinking way too much of yourself. Self-hatred at the opposite end would be degrading yourself, hatred of yourself. In the middle is the confident yet humble Tao cultivated. So that is the path of moderation. Number 2, what does it mean to dwelling with the right location other than the Tao of humility? So A secondary meaning, another layer of meaning, will tie back later on to the seventh virtue, the very last one. So you'll see that when we get to it. But basically, for now, think about what I have here. By being observant and acting only when appropriate or necessary, it appears as though the cultivator always shows up at the right place at the right time. The Tao cultivator takes action in a very timely way, just when the help of the cultivator is needed the most. So we'll come back to this, but think about those two ideas together. Number one, occupying a lower place, not needing a high-profile spotlight to showcase yourself, to show off to other people, being very humble. And number two, being at the right place at the right time to do the right thing for the right reasons. That we will come back to. Let's proceed. So next line, line 6, we've got feeling with great depth. So 3 characters. The first character means heart in modern Mandarin. When we translate that character in most Buddhist scripture, oftentimes this character, xin, instead of heart, is translated as mind, as in what you think, how you feel. Here, it is specifically about feelings, so I translate as feeling, but initially I used heart as the translation. What about the meaning? Well, feeling with great depth, the Tao cultivator's reserved and quiet demeanor does not mean he or she is unfeeling, quite the opposite. The depth that is represented by the last character here shows up in a couple of different ways, and one of them is the depth of feelings. So let's tackle that next. For now, let's tackle xin, the character for heart. Character xin means heart, often translated as mind in the context of thinking. Initially, I went for the more literal root. That is, I translated heart as heart. Later, I changed it to feeling to be more in line with dwelling and giving, so it's more poetically consistent. And also, I'm trying to be closer to the original meaning, which is about a great depth of feeling. And then let's talk about the last character here, which means abyss, which is a deep pool of water. So 2 things. 1, depth of feeling, as I mentioned, and number 2, depth of character. So not quite the same thing. So to feel very deeply, for instance, a deep sense of compassion, that's one thing. But what about the depth of character? It just means that the Tao cultivator is not a person who is very shallow, who is surface-oriented, and who basically shows everything. Usually, the Tao cultivator is someone who has a lot of dimensions to him or her, who has a lot of capabilities, a lot of accomplishments, perhaps in the past, that we don't know about. You know, it's typical that one day you discover something really cool about this person, and you're like, wow, I had no idea you were so multi-talented. That would be a similar situation. That would only be possible because that person was a person of great depth. It really takes time to discover all the different aspects of this person. Let's move on. We have 7 virtues. We are now on number 7. So, number 7, giving with great kindness. So, you notice that the last line had great depth. This time we have great kindness. These are both translations of the middle character, sa. Sa means good. It can mean great. and it can mean right, which is the right location in line 5. So how is this tied to water? The last line, we tied it to water, like a deep pool of water. That's because of the great deal of depth, you can't figure everything out about that person right off the bat. With this right here, it's a reference about how water gives to all living things. Water slays the thirst of all living creatures. And the Tao cultivator, likewise, is giving to all, not to the point of driving oneself to be financially insolvent or bankrupt, but definitely a generous spirit that is giving and keeps on giving. So when we talked about the extreme depth of feeling in line 6, feeling with great depth, that deep feeling shows up here as a feeling of great kindness, great compassion. So here's another visual metaphor, visual imagery for everyone. In the Tao, giving is more like a stream that keeps on flowing, rather than a torrent. So a torrent would be like a huge, overwhelming amount all at once, a lot of splashing of water, just upending a barrel, causing everything to come out all at once. So the giving in the Tao is not like that. The giving in the Tao is what in modern Mandarin would be 细水长流, a stream that is not big, not huge, it's a small stream, but it continues to flow. It's about a constant flow, never too much, but always present day after day. And the reason why that's more Tao-centric, more Tao-oriented, is because it lasts. It's the kind of giving that lasts. A torrent, a splash, is a once-only event. After that, there's no more to give. So, with these 3 lines, I would like to ask everyone to note the connection with water. With number 5, dwelling with the right location, it means water flowing to the lowest place. The lowest place where arrogant people don't want to be because they want to go higher. Number 2, feeling with great depth, I would like everyone to visualize a deep abyss of water. Water with great depth. So that great depth hides a lot of interesting, cool things that the Tao cultivator, the person with the great depth, has no need to reveal completely to the world. The preference is that when you get to know this person, you will take the time to really get to know him or her and discover all the hidden dimensions. Lastly, giving with great kindness. So visualize all the animals and plants drawing water to slake their thirst. So these are all connections to water. Moving on. Here's a question for everyone. Sort of a quiz in the middle of the presentation, and I would like to invite your opinion. So water, is water always a good thing? What about flooding, rusting, causing metal tools to be unusable? What about when water sinks ships? What about the Titanic, sinking into the ocean, to the bottom of the ocean? What about that? So would water, be capable of being very bad as well? So I'd like to put that out there for everyone to consider. So water's not always good, right? It's not just the 7 virtues. It's also, quite a bit of negativity that we're pointing out here. What about that? Mental exercise. I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to think it over, and then I'll provide some suggestions as to which direction the thought may proceed. Okay, excellent. From Trisha, it just is. doing what it does not mean to be good or bad. Water just is. It's water. What do you want? It can float ships and it can sink ships. That is the nature of water. You can use water to clean your blade, or if you leave it there for too long, it can rust your blade. So here's my suggestion. Water, like the Tao, can be constructive or destructive. Two sides of the same coin. And oftentimes, to destroy is the same as to create. Example, there are actually quite a few man-made ships that are sunk at the coast, by the coast. The reason for that is because when the ship sinks to the bottom of the ocean, it can be the basis to build corals for which, the fish find that to be just a great habitat. It's actually beneficial to the ecology underneath the waves. So as you destroy a ship by sinking it, you're also creating a habitat for ocean life. So is it destruction or is it creation? Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes to both. It's two sides of the same coin. And what about the sinking of Titanic? Well, it's the creation of James Cameron, the director. So water, also like the Tao, has no emotion. It does not and cannot act out of goodwill or malice. When water slakes your thirst, it's not because water loves you. When water drowns someone, it's not because water hates that someone. As Trisha points out, water is water. It does what it does. It just is. And as John points out, another quote from a very famous martial artist, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. And that's something that you will find in my coverage of other chapters of the Tao Te Ching as well. So let's continue. So it has no emotions. It does not and cannot act out of goodwill or malice. But wait a minute. Aren't we, in this chapter, talking about emulating water or emulating the Tao? So are we saying that we should emulate water and Tao to be both destructive and constructive? Are we saying that we don't want to act out of any emotions at all, no feelings, no goodwill, no malice, that we should be just sort of like a robot? Well, actually, that's not what the Tao teaching is either. So when human beings emulate water and the Tao, there's an added dimension. What is that added dimension? Well, human beings have the added dimension of feelings and intentions, which are entirely natural. So we get these emotions, we get feelings, we get thoughts, we get ideas, we have plans. These are all from the naturally given gift of intelligence. So human beings, after all, are not water, are not the Tao, so we're not exactly the same. Because of that, because of the added dimension, it is incumbent upon human beings to utilize the mind. What mind? Human intelligence, the human mind. Sentient, because we're sentient beings. You have to use the mind to determine the how and why of what you do. So whenever you choose to emulate water or the Tao, you have to tie it back with the reason for which you are emulating water or the Tao. So that reason would be the beneficial effects of the Tao to help and nurture other sentient beings to be of service. So coming back to the question, is water always a good thing? Well, no. Sometimes water can be bad if it is misused. What about flooding, rushing, when water sinks ships? Yep, all of those things can happen. Sometimes we're good, sometimes we're bad. And good and bad will be simply human judgment, depending on circumstance and perspective. So moving on, let's cover the last 4 of the 7 virtues. We've gone through the first 3. We got 4 more to go. So what I'll do, I think, just like Bill and Alex have done today, I will bring in my clock over here so we can watch the time. Okay, so next we have line 8, speaking with great integrity. So let's talk about that. So note that 8, 9, 10, 11, these have something in common. They're all about the cultivator's actions in society. So unlike the first 3 lines, the comparison with water is not as obvious. They're still there if you peel back the layers. So a note on translation. Initially, I translated yen, the first character in line 8, as words. Later, I changed it to speaking. So number 1, it's more poetically consistent. If you look at the first word of all these different lines, it's a verb in the present tense. So it's more poetically consistent. It's also more accurate in terms of reflecting the original true meaning, which has to do with spoken words and not written words. So when you speak, you want to speak with great, and the last character here means belief, faith, trust. So you want to speak with great conviction, great integrity, great truthfulness, all of the above. And that is because Tao cultivators have a duty to speak the truth, like a placid pool of water reflecting its surroundings clearly. So that's the reference to water. It's not as obvious. So when you have a pool of water that's just like a mirror, you can see everything being reflected so clearly. When the water is agitated, it loses the ability to reflect its surroundings in that same accurate, clear way. So drawing from that to apply that to human beings, what it means is that when your state of mind is agitated, when you are anxious, when you are depressed, resentful, angry, you are no longer capable of reflecting on your surroundings, everyone and everything, in a very accurate way. Your perspective becomes distorted. You see certain people as your mortal enemies, perhaps. You see things in sort of a funhouse mirror type of distortion. It is only when you settle down in a state of peace, when you calm down, when you take a deep breath and relax and regain and maintain your composure, your mental and spiritual composure, that the distortions will begin to go away. And then you can see and reflect upon everything that's external to you in a very accurate and clear way again. So this last part is not just a reference to water, but it also suggests what happens to our own mind when we react to the world. whether we do so from agitation or from calmness and composure. Okay, the next line after this, governing with great administration. Let's see, I don't know if we're ready to handle that line just yet. Let's take a look. So, governing with great administration. The governing here refers to a leadership role, and there are two aspects to it. By now, you have seen that all of these lines have multiple layers of meaning. So here, it can have an internal and also external, two different layers of meaning. When it's external, to talk about governing, it's a reference to leading people, and this could be leading people at the workplace, but it could also be family, could also be community, society, country, circle of friends, any kind of setting. So a leadership role in terms of governing and administration. Internally, so remember, number one is external to you. Number two is internal to you. Internal to you means exerting sovereign control over one's own life, your own life. Managing, organizing, and running all the details in your own life. So being in charge, being the ruler of everything that happens for yourself. All of the things that occur, plus your reaction to the things that occur, you have absolute control over your reaction, your feelings to everything that has happened. So we can draw from number 1 and 2 and talk about what does it mean to exercise leadership internally or externally. What would be the commonality? The common aspects of leadership in both the internal and the external scenarios, either way, it's about having a vision for the future. When it's external, it's your vision for the group. You know, what would I like to see in my community? Or what would I like to see for my company? And so on. For yourself, vision for the future. How do I envision myself in 5 years, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? A vision for the future, setting a direction. Now that I have a vision for the future, which way do I go to get there? What is my approach? I want to strike out in that particular direction, start making progress toward that vision. Coming up with a plan. So not just a direction, but also a plan of getting there. It's just like traveling in our physical universe, in the material world. When we have a direction, when we have a destination in mind, we want to come up with a plan. How do I get there? What is the mode of transportation? Am I walking, riding a bicycle, driving a car, taking the bus, flying in a plane? What? There's got to be a plan. Once you have the plan, executing that plan, take action. If it's airfare, I want to go ahead and purchase that. If it's driving a car, I want to hop into the vehicle, make sure it has gasoline to be on my way. Adjusting the plan along the way, because no plan ever goes exactly as you envision at first. Along the way, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be detours, you're going to have to make your adjustment. So great administration, in this case, will be leadership role externally or internally. So it doesn't matter if you don't have an external leadership role, perhaps at the workplace, you are just one of the many office workers in a cubicle, that's okay, because no matter what, you always have the leadership role internally for your own life. So even for your own life, you want to come up with a plan, you want to have a vision as to where you're going, and you want to be able to execute that plan and adjust your plan along the way. Okay, we're we're not quite ready yet, I think, to go to line 10, which is handling with great capability. I want to talk about the two different aspects of the administration of water to further tie this particular line to the metaphor, because after all, let's not forget, when we're talking about these 7 lines, these are the last 4 of the 7 lines, we're talking about the 7 virtues of water. So now the question is, the administration, the governance, the leadership, how do we draw some sort of parallel from that real world event, what we do in society? How do we connect that with water? Number 1, sages note that water administers the thirst of all living things equally, without bias and without playing favorites. So water doesn't care what kind of animals come to take a drink. Water doesn't care what sort of plants will draw water to nourish itself. Water simply administers to all living things. So in a similar way, as a cultivator of the Tao, you would also have the duty to treat everyone with the same respect, regardless of position. So, everyone from people occupying the highest positions, perhaps politicians, to people occupying a very low level in society, people who are perhaps stricken by poverty, people who are perhaps begging for food, they are equally deserving of respect as the people who have a big fancy title. How does this tie in to leadership? Well, I have heard it said many times from many people when they talk about the leaders or the boss that they admire the most. So often, so many times, they talk about a particular person, maybe the CEO of a company, someone who was consistent and respectful to everybody. So one particular person, a newscaster, she spoke of the very best boss that she had ever known. And she named this particular gentleman who was the CEO, and that CEO treated everyone with the same respect. It didn't matter if you were the star anchor, with the news desk, or if you were the janitor cleaning up after hours. That CEO treated everyone with the same respect, much as water will administer to all living things. Now, that same respectful attitude did not mean that everyone got equal treatment in the workplace. How everyone fares would depend on how well they do, because there are such things as promotion and demotion. There are such things as praise and reprimand, but it didn't affect the basic respect that the great leader has for everybody. So a reprimand, a demotion, that can be done in a respectful way too. That's the point. So that's one aspect of the administration of water that is ultimately egalitarian. Number 2, how water gets to the place it wants to go is equivalent to how sages accomplish their goals. What do I mean by that? So water flows, and as it flows, it's going to encounter some obstacles. As you proceed in life, you're going to encounter some obstacles. So what happens when water encounters obstacles? Well, water simply flows around them without complaint, without resentment. So this, I hope you can see that this is tied to what we talked about before, having a plan, executing that plan, and then adjusting the plan as you go. So just by watching a stream or a river, we can tell when water flows into a rock, it doesn't complain. It doesn't wait for the rock to get out of its way. It just goes around. So in a similar way, Dao cultivators approach their objectives, the vision, the goal, the destination that you have in mind, you approach that with the same flexibility and you adjust dynamically. When you encounter an obstacle, without resentment, without anger, you simply figure out a different way. So now you can see when we peel back the layers, the water metaphor is still quite strong. And now we can go to the sixth, next to last virtue that water has. Number 6 out of 7 of the 7 virtues, handling with great capability. How is that connected to water? So before we get to the capabilities of water, what I would like to point out is to focus on the word handling and great capability. 是善能. So these are referencing worldly affairs, things that people do all the time. Perhaps resolving disputes, perhaps working on a particular project, perhaps building something, perhaps fixing something. It could be anything. Handling with great capability, and this is in the context with society in mind. As I said, these last 4 lines are all about what we do in society. So when you are handling with great capability, what this means is that, number 1, the Tao cultivator is involved, engaged. A real sage works among people, not in isolated hermitage. So when we talk about how you are handling with great capability, this would not apply to a hermit living in a sage. That hermit does not have a whole lot to do with community or society. But that hermit is not a real Tao sage. A real Tao sage is involved in that community, engaged in the activities. Number 2, the real sage is also dynamic and active. So this is where I have to, again, point out that there's a westernized going with the flow, which sometimes, for some people, translates to indifference or apathy or shrugging of the shoulders. Just not wanting to do anything, what we would call a couch potato, what some would say, no, I'm not a couch potato, I'm just going with the flow. And today, the flow is that there's nothing to do. So I'm just going to be here and just be rather than to do. Well, that can be an excuse. So a real Tao sage, while needing downtime, while needing quiet time for meditation and reflection, while nevertheless incorporate the active and dynamic aspects of life into every single day. So there's no indifference or apathy. There's no excuse for being lazy. Lastly, to say that the Tao sage handles with great capability is to say that the Tao sage is very effective, very competent, because the Tao sage, like the Tao cultivator, gets things done. And those things are done well. Those things are done with excellence. Those things are done at a high level of quality. So note that these are all different. Number 1, Tao cultivators are involved in society, in community. Number 2, Tao cultivators are action-oriented. They are not passive, far from it. And number 3, Tao cultivators are the ones that do a great job because they follow the Tao. So now the challenge for everyone is to tie these into water. So we're talking about Tao cultivators having great capabilities. What about water? How does that tie into the water metaphor? So I want to spend a moment to talk about the versatile capabilities of water. And I see that, just as I indicated when we began, today is going to be all about focusing on the 7 virtues. So a lot of mental imagery, but not a whole lot in terms of illustrating stories. That'll come later. So capabilities of water. Let's begin by looking at nature. In nature, when we observe water, we notice that water has different forms. Does anyone know what I mean by that? The different forms of water? This is not meant to be a difficult, tricky puzzle. Yes, so from Dan says ice, gas, steam. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go through them. Let's talk about them. As liquid, this is the typical form that we interact with water, because in our habitats, in our native environment, water usually exists in liquid form. It's plentiful in liquid form, and as water, it conforms, penetrates, and dissolves. Let me just talk about these one by one. Water conforming, what I mean by that is whatever container you put water in, it assumes that particular shape. You put water into a bottle, it's the shape of the bottle. You put that into a cup, it's the shape of a cup. At a larger scale, you put water into a lake, it assumes the shape of a lake. You put water into the ocean, you end up with the ocean. So water conforms to its container, no matter what that container is, whether it's man-made or nature-made. 2, water penetrates. What I mean by that is twofold. Number 1, water seeps in everywhere. Water gets absorbed by porous material. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that dripping water, given time, will penetrate through a rock. So water has that ability not just to conform to a container, but also to penetrate what seems like a really difficult object to penetrate, a rock. And number 3, water dissolves. That is to say, water is the universal solvent. It can dissolve anything, with sufficient time. So not only that, and that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that cleaning with water always works by way of dissolution. That is, water will come and wash away, will take away, carry away, dissolve and carry away dirty particles or just dirt. And we end up being clean when we wash ourselves with water. So that's one of the powers that water has. So water as liquid is plenty powerful all by itself, very versatile, conforms to anything, and can do a lot, can do many different things. Nothing's as powerful as water. And next time, we'll talk about how the softness of water defeats the hardest substance. But different forms. The colder water gets, the more water hardens as ice. So we can look at that and draw inspiration from that. It's just one way to think about how when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So as the temperature drops, water becomes ever more hardened as ice. The water becomes tougher. But what about the other extreme in the temperature? Well, even in our immediate environment, water is evaporating all the time. It's where clouds come from. It's evaporated water gathering up in the sky, and it makes precipitation possible. By precipitation, I'm talking about rain, snow, hail, etc. So that's in nature. So what about for human beings? Well, advances in human civilization can be seen in our ability to harness water in the different forms. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take liquid, let's take solid, and let's take gas, the different forms of water, and consider how they are milestones, how they are signs of civilization. So for instance, steam-powered machinery. So we actually still have steam-powered locomotives, trains in operation. So that power cannot be underestimated. Ice. What about that in civilization? Well, it has become so commonplace and indispensable that we pretty much take it for granted. But consider life without ice. Wouldn't that be horrible? Well, that's what ancient people had to deal with. They had no ice whatsoever. It's because we have technology that we have ice. And what about water in the liquid form? Well, we have dams. We have hydroelectric plants that generate electrical power. So these are the versatile powers of water, versatile capabilities. So think about how powerful water is in each of its distinct forms. Whatever form it can take, it's got a lot of power. So just like water, a human being would also be versatile in capabilities in getting things done regardless of the form that one has to adapt to, conforming to different containers, and would also be, just like water flowing, be very versatile in terms of the approach to get to a particular destination. Okay, we're nearing the end of our time together, so let me jump ahead. So, just a reminder for everyone in my summary slide here, more characteristics of water, which represents the Tao. Number one, like undisturbed water, I want to challenge everyone to assume a state of mind that is peaceful. The peaceful state is where you can reflect on everything and everyone accurately with complete clarity. So that's just a reminder for everybody. Number two, like flowing water, finding its way downstream, I want to challenge everyone to have the versatile mindset to be flexible as you adjust your approach to a particular goal. If your way is blocked, that's not the end of the story. If you keep your eyes open, I'm willing to bet that there's another path open to you. Number three, like rainfall relieving the drought, take action when it will do the most good. This has to do with virtue number 7, the last virtue that we didn't get a chance to cover today. But basically, life is all about timing. If it's too soon or too late, your impact is not going to be as great. But by observation, by watching what's going on and taking action at the right time, you will be able to greatly increase your effectiveness.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位顶传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.